afternoon's exploration, and that's what it's going to be, an exploration of the subject, is titled Electoralism and/or Revolution, Marginalizing the Power of State, Capitalist, and Party Elite. And that's in line with the overall theme of this year's Left Forum, Reform or Revolution, imagining a world with transformative justice. The broad question here that we'll be talking about for the next hour or so is, how does electoral activity fit into the transformative equation?
By thanking of the Left Forum and Rosa Luxemburg Foundation for the invitation. This is my first visit to US, and I am very happy to finally be here. As you can hear, my English is a bit rusty. Please forgive me for that. The situation in Germany is unique in several ways, not unlike the US left. Maybe we think of ourselves as in the belly of the beast. The German Chancellor Merkel is very much the head and motor of austerity politics in Europe. I will try and shed some light on the development of the left party, Die Linke, in Germany. Still a rather young party. And I try and sketch out some ideas on what are the tasks for a left party. Die Linke has developed very much as a result of the shift in social democrats towards neoliberalism and the late 1990s. The government of Greens and Social Democrats implemented a workfare system that not only worsened the condition of the unemployed, but reached deep into the middle class. It endangered the living standard and helped building the biggest low-wage market of the times. The workload and stress has increased, conditioned, work has spread, and the retirement age has been increased to 67. In cause of gap in representation for workers, for the unemployed, for all those who formerly had been mostly tied to the Social Democrats. Maybe not always in their best interest, but still. 2003, protest against this politics arose from the bottom up. The unions with their traditional ties to Social Democratic Party were at first reluctant to organize against the neoliberal agenda. An alliance of union locals, poor people's movements, and leftists were calling for protests. 100,000 people came, which a lot of Germany. But there was not one to turn to, no parliamentary force to pick up the queue. The PDS, former Socialist Party of the GDR, had not been able to form a strong base in the western part of Germany and had just been kicked out of parliament. Left unionists, disenchanted Social Democrats and other peoples from social movements therefore formed the WASG, the name meaning Electoral Alternative for Social Justice. They did so to put pressure on the Social Democrats as well as to push for different unions politics and to fight back the neoliberal agenda. The WASG quickly grew, but almost only in the West. In 2005, PDS and WASG ran together for the elections and subsequently merged. With the party Die Linke, a new political force has been established that has made an issue of the social and economic costs of neoliberalism, the crisis and the workfare regime, and has gained a hearing in Parliament. and in the public arena. For the first time, the opportunity for a common left project emerged, and there was a sound and optimistic response to that. 2008, the crisis hit Germany, bailout of the banks followed. In a way, the crisis was revering Die Linke, as with the overall skepticism towards capitalism rising, we gained almost 12% in the general elections in 2009. We could not defend this in the very different situations 2013, but still we reached 8.6% and established the party as the third biggest parliamentary group. We cannot promise that we will fix things. We could not fulfill this hope, nor does it even correspond to our understanding of politics. People need to make the experience of fighting for something successfully. Contributing so to such experience is an important task for Die Linke. Hegemony is not changed first and foremost in Parliament. Changes in relations of forces can be represented there, and parliamentary work can be a useful resource in regard to inquiries, research, and access to the media, all of which are very important areas in the winning of hegemony. However, without a change in the social relations, no real successes can be obtained in Parliament. The lack of left representation protects in the hegemony of the ruling bloc. Many people share left demands, but they not believe that they can be realized. It is our understanding that political consciousness does not develop through political agitation, but through experience that are then consciously processed by those involved. We will not win over the people just because we make the right demands. If left-wing politics is to be emancipatory, it must rely on the involvement of the people and their moves towards self-emancipation. Left-wing politics must empower people to stand up for their own interests and to understand politics as something that not only affects their lives, but as something that they are also involved in. People need to become the subjects of politics, not objects to be persuaded by us. As part of the left, we can play a useful role in this process by carrying out responsible and consistent struggles. But we also need to organize these learning processes, and doing so needs to form part of all our campaigns and analyses. Die Linke has to instigate confrontations and must be present in social movements, trade unions, municipalities, and organize within their own base as well as outside. Whoever has participated in successful strike or defended the local hospital against privatization knows how quickly perception changes. What used to seem impossible to change turns out to be alterable. I am relying on Antonio Gramsci, of course. We need to build for a counter-hegemonic bloc, where Die Linke can play the role of a hinge, providing and working on a platform that can bring together different single or multi-issue movements and organizations, pushing for demands that bridge the cleavage between core workers and precarious workers and the employed. To be able to do so, Die Linke has to strengthen its roots in the local fight within unions, social movements, and everyday struggle. And we need to set up long-term campaigns. One example would be redistribution of wealth. The mainstream debate addresses this merely in terms of tax increase. In reality, however, it is about public services and public infrastructure. Whenever we call on money from the rich to expand childcare services, develop public transport routes, we always receive majority support. It is one thing to link these issues, but it's also important to state that such policies will only come about through social struggle. This is a point that Die Linke needs to emphasize to the trade unions. The SPD is wrong to claim that social reforms can be achieved without the redistribution of wealth. This is a false promise and will lead to a further deterioration of people's standard of living. We have to take an integrated and transformative approach. The party must ensure that its political conceptions focuses on all aspects of the political actor, and that it does so in a manner that enables in the develop political opportunities for actions. Otherwise, we will suffer the same fate, punished for being able to enforce their political program. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Riexinger. Now we have Kshama Sawant.
Thank you all, sisters, brothers, comrades, for being here. And thank you, Bernd. Am I saying your name right? Bernd. Sorry. For that enlightening talk about Die Linke's work in Europe. And I thought that it would be really great if we opened our discussion with his talk, because I think the underlying message of everything that we will be talking about has to be an understanding of the international nature of the struggle. And many of the lessons that we have learned in Europe can be applied in the US, and many of the lessons we are learning in the US can be applied in Europe, although the concrete on-the-ground situations differ. I wanted to start first by thanking Glenn Ford for being here. Glenn Ford was recently in Seattle to speak at our 15 Now national conference, and we really appreciated his voice there to very openly call out the Democratic Party establishment in their Me Too tactics that they're trying to use. I also wanted to apologize if some of you noticed me doing stuff on my phone. I didn't mean to be distracted, but I mentioned that not only to apologize, but also to say that what's happening in Seattle is still under flux. And I think that while I cannot go into the details of the 15 Now campaign, which we will be covering in another panel, which I hope you all will be able to attend later today, it reflects how much we're still having to fight. And it's interesting that this battle, at least in Seattle, is not over yet, even though, as some of you may know, but I wanted to make this announcement, this is absolutely the most historic and groundbreaking event that has happened in recent decades. On Thursday this week, the Seattle City Council's Select Committee on Minimum Wage and Income Inequality voted unanimously to increase the minimum wage of Seattle to $15 an hour. And I think a lot of the lessons from how we won this demand are very much linked to the questions of electoralism and whether or not revolutionaries should engage in electoral politics. Because the 15 Now campaign, grassroots campaign, and the movement for $15 an hour was something that developed in the wake of our historic success last year, winning a seat for a socialist in the city council. And I think that there is nothing better than using a live demonstration of a concrete victory that came from the basis of an electoral position for us to learn that the questions of electoralism versus revolution cannot be posed in a simplistic manner. They have to be discussed in a much more substantial way. And the question is not, at least to us in Socialist Alternative, the question is not, and clearly for Die Linke, the question is not whether or not to run electoral campaigns. The question is, how can we run electoral campaigns and use the electoral platform to push forward radical movements that will not only demand and win radical reforms under capitalism, but very clearly and unambiguously raise the question of a system change, and not just system change in the abstract. I will say, as a socialist, we need an alternative. Young people are going to be turning to us and asking, yes, I agree with you, capitalism has completely failed us, but what do we go to? It is not enough just to protest and just be disenchanted with capitalism. We have to have a concrete alternative. And those of us who are clear about socialism have to boldly advocate for that through our electoral campaigns and through whatever movements we are part of. And if people are not clear about it, we should be willing to engage in honest but open debate to convince people that this is the way forward. And hopefully we'll have a chance to draw that out a little bit. I also think that it's really great that Bernd went first to talk about the struggles in Europe. And again, those are bound up with what the left should do in Europe in terms of electoral politics. And I won't be able to go into too much detail about it, but hopefully we will be able to link what's happening in Europe to what's happening in the US as well. And I think Bernd said that well. The question of electoralism is really a question of whether or not electoral campaigns and electoral politics serve as tools to build more substantive movements that can incorporate the agenda of social change, or is the building of social movements somehow hampered by participating in electoral campaigns? That's the question a lot of people are grappling with. And just to set the stage, let's admit that the disgust, and I'm now going to focus on the US, the disgust and the frustration and the complete disengagement in some cases of American people, especially younger people, with electoral politics is completely justified. We have to start at that point. We have to agree with them, because that is our starting point, to say that no, both the parties, the two big business parties, are failing us, and it is a completely failed strategy to continue putting our faith in the Democrats. And it's and recognizing that the popularity of the US Congress is at an all-time low. I was reading in some survey somewhere, they did a survey of some of the most unsavory and unlikable things in life, and said, do Do you dislike U.S. I'm paraphrasing. I don't know the exact wording of the survey, but do you dislike U.S. Congress more than so and so? So one of the questions which always stands out in my mind, I don't know why, but it said, do you dislike U.S. Congress more than cockroaches? And and the answer is yes for the majority. And that might sound flippant, but it reflects the reality of the very sort of deep, just absolute disgust that people, I can't think of another word, that people feel, and yet the incumbency rate of US Congress is well over 95%. How do we explain that disconnect? And that is where, when we explain that disconnect is where we run into challenges for ourselves, that disengaging or staying out of electoral politics is not the answer. Because as long as the genuine left, the radical left, the revolutionary left stays completely outside of electoral politics, the Democratic Party will continue building their platform because young people who are looking for an alternative will not find one. When we were out on the street, in 2008, explaining to people that, look, if you vote for Obama, that is going to be yet another betrayal. The question that was directed at us, the most legitimate question is, okay, so what should I do? Who should I vote for? What is the alternative? And unless the left takes on this challenge, it's an abdication of responsibility if we don't take up the challenge of providing a real alternative. And the real alternative has to be developed at many levels. I know that, Glenn Ford was saying that, I tried to write what you said, you can win as a socialist, open socialist, at least in Seattle. And I'm sure people might think that this has something to do with the water we drink or the hippie culture, socks and sandals kind of thing. But the reality is that there is a huge opening for the left everywhere in the United States. Obviously, conditions differ from city to city, from region to region. But Seattle, while people may think that, well, it's easier for a socialist to build there because, the city is progressive, what would you do in a city like Mobile, Alabama? And that's a fair question. But the reality is that in Seattle, there is no Republican Party to speak of. It's controlled by the Democratic Party establishment. And to challenge the Democratic Party's position or their claimed position as the left is a challenge that could have been taken up. It could have been taken up by anybody on the left, but Socialist Alternative did that. And I want to be able to talk more about how Socialist Alternative or any similar socialist core organization is not incidental, but absolutely critical to be building this kind of electoral movement that can use that energy for mass movement. It's not incidental. We need organized movements, and those organized movements come only from a core of parties that have a clear analysis of how to explain events and using that explanation to concretely challenge the establishment, to have the audacity to call for $15 an hour and go and win it. That's the kind of audacity we need. When everybody says that you can't do it, and especially as you can't do it as a socialist, we have to have the audacity to be able to do that. And that doesn't happen incidentally. That happens through an understanding of events and recognizing the fact that there is a space now for the left, especially among younger people who are seeking to throw their energies, throw their activism into something, but not in the Democratic Party. Am I out of time?
Oh, about.